go DiSTRiCT, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT DiSTRiCT, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
All right, well, welcome and what is up, Fantasyland? We are live right now with Scott Pianowski of Yahoo Sports, and we are already 3 weeks into the season. That's 20 to 25% of the way through the fantasy regular season, depending on how your regular season runs. But it's almost crazy to think about, but that's just how short the season is. So we're at the point where the teams, the players, they're coming into focus, and it's really time to throw away those preseason hot takes, time to embrace what's real. Don't get drawn off track by the mirages, but just figure it out, and we're here to help you do that. And to do that today, as I said, we do have Scott Pianowski with us today from Yahoo Sports, one of my earliest friends from fantasy football days, way back in, I think it was 1990. Scott and I first ran into each other on the Prodigy message boards, and we've been bouncing stuff off each other ever since. It's been a great time, and I just always love to get Scott's thoughts on the season, especially right. Not too far into draft season, and then also right now when we're starting to get things figured out. So Scott, thanks for joining us today, and why don't you tell us what you've got going on, anything you want to plug, anything else you want to say?
Thanks for having me, guys. It's great to reconnect with smart people, and in the case of Dan, a very old friend. I always tell the story that he gave me the Randy Moss intel before anybody else had it. Said he scored like 8 touchdowns in the last practice, and even though teams don't use 3 receivers in 1998, the Vikings are going to use Randy Moss. You want him on all your teams. I didn't draft him on all my teams, but I had some of them. I made a little bit of money on Randy Moss. I should have gone to the moon with Randy Moss. Instead, I got to the clouds, but wasn't 1998 fun. The Super Bowl I cry for. We should have had Broncos and Vikings. Damn Gary Anderson. But the goal is to figure out the season and adjust quicker than everybody else, right? You do all the work, lift all the weights, take all the reps, do all the best balls. And then when the real games are played and all that stuff means more than anything we can glean in the summer, you have to adjust, you have to pivot. And NFL, I'm going to come out hot with a couple of quick things here. NFL is all about being wrong, right? I mean, we may look back and say, how did the Carolina Panthers not take C.J. Stroud? I am blown away at C.J. Stroud is behind, 5 lawn chairs, and he looks poised and doesn't take sacks, and he's making a receiver room that I like, but it's not like the best receiver room in the league or anything. He's making those guys all playable. So what was I wrong about? Well, plenty of things. We don't have enough time to go into all of it, but I'm betting Sam Laporta props every week because I'm sick over having him nowhere, pretty much. Sam Laporta is a grown-ass man, and he's setting also – and this week is going to be the people pounding on the table. Oh, he's a top 8 tight end. No, he's a top 5 tight end. No, he's a top 2 tight end. It doesn't matter. We're all in love with Sam Laporta. I'm in love with Sam Laporta. And I'm only benefiting from it with props, which even the prop market's going to blow out now because he had too good of a game in week 3. But wrong about Laporta, the rookie tight end thing, throw it in the garbage. I ranked Garrett Wilson over Davante Adams by the final bell. And I know I took Wilson over Adams at least once or twice. But whatever, it's not fair to Wilson to run it, right? I mean, Aaron Rodgers gets hurt in 15 seconds. Obviously, Zach Wilson is a total brick. But the old me, the old Pianowski would have been like, I'm going to keep taking Davante Adams until it proves to be wrong. You're giving me Davante Adams in the second round? Thank you. That was the old me. The new me is like, oh, no, I got to get younger. I got to skate to where the puck is headed. I got to be cool and take boutique-y Garrett Wilson over Davante Adams, who has never steered me wrong once he broke. Last year, Derek Carr played like garbage. Davante Adams was great. Jimmy Garoppolo's not good. Doesn't matter. They may be playing a 58-year-old Brian Hoyer or an inexperienced Aiden O'Connell soon. That's not going to matter because Davante Adams is unbreakable. And I have all these Garrett Wilson shares that the forced hold, you can't trade them. I should have been in on that, the old whiteouts. Also, I just told a good friend of mine, my friend Chris, in text right before, he said, dude, I got a really good receiver room. I have to drop somebody. I can't trade these guys, JSN or Jahan Dotson. Jahan Dotson was one of my go-get-him guys. And Sam Howell, man, you find somebody who will hold you as long as Sam Howell holds the football. 9 sacks last week against Buffalo. Even the game he quote-unquote played well against Denver, I thought he got lucky on some throws that looked like medicine balls. Man, if you guys can take my Garrett Wilson, Jahan Dotson shares, it's not your fault all-stars. DJ Moore lives in that space. I know he's been quasi-productive for 2 straight weeks, but how can you win with Justin Fields? It's not your fault, DJ Moore. It's not your fault, Garrett Wilson. It's not your fault, Jahan Dotson. But I got the last 2 guys on my teams, and it's really killing me right now.
Scott, it was a boutique that somebody threw a brick through the window of when you go from Aaron Rodgers to Zach Wilson, though, with Garrett Wilson. So we'll give you an asterisk on that one. Jahan Dotson, very, very, very disappointing. Dan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I've got a small truckload of Jahan Dotson shares I need to unload somewhere as well. So problem is everywhere I take them, nobody's buying. So, that's the way it goes. And I definitely had some Garrett Wilson over Davante Adams. I wish I had more Adams, less Wilson, but I tried to make up for it in my Keenan Allen shares, so at least those are looking good. So.
Well, you mentioned Allen, right? I was looking over today, and again, old Pianowski, take the boring, Raul Abanya's All-Stars, which is kind of like the Joseph Adai All-Stars for football. I would have been all over the Keenan Allens and the Davante Adamses, and Adam Thielen is on some of my teams. Look, he's 33. That could go. Adam Thielen could be a drop in a few weeks. I get it. He just had the best game he's going to have all season. But I used to be all about boring veterans, and I'll take the guys that nobody else wants to take, and not every pick has to be a hair on fire upside pick. And this is a great year. I mean, look at Keenan Allen, and look, the setup now, right? He's going to get 1 million targets, and people say, oh, well, there's nobody else there. They're going to gang up. But Keenan Allen catches passes that the defense is actually content to give up a lot of the time, right? Football defense has gotten pretty boring in a lot of ways. It's so much, and Moss changed the game, right? When Randy Moss came to the NFL, defensive coordinator said, okay, we got to play a defense now that doesn't allow an 80-yard touchdown on every play because this guy could do it. This guy scares the living pants off us. 2 deep shell, make them beat you with 13-play drives or 17-play drives if you're the New England Patriots. If the Patriots throw a pass for 20 yards, I'm going to start hugging strangers, man. It kills me. I'll never get over the N'Keal Harry draft when they could have had Debo, they could have had McLaurin, they could have had DK, all 1 million great receivers in that class. They took N'Keal Harry, who couldn't run away from any of the 3 of us. But, these old receivers, Keenan Allen is going to get targeted off the butt. It's just sickening now. How good of a play he is, and I'm underweight on Keenan Allen, and you can't really buy. I guess you could buy high on him. If we redrafted now, I think he'd be at worst a 3rd round pick and might go in the 2nd round.
He might go in some first rounds. I mean,
maybe.
Allen, now the target share is going to be north of 30%.
Mm-hmm.
He has a career high in catches, breaks the Chargers record for most catches in a game, and sets a personal record in yardage. It's wild. The guy's ageless. Guys, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Dan's got a bunch of great questions for Scott to help you get ready for Week 4.
Hey, we're all starting new fantasy leagues all the time, and more often than not, where do we start our fantasy leagues at Player Profiler? On Sleeper, because it's the best. You can imagine my excitement when I saw Sleeper rolled out. Sleeper picks, baby. And game stacking is the path to positive returns with these pick'em games. Find that sneaky shootout and set most of the players to go over their projection for that week. Or you find a game going to get dragged into the mud and take every member of the passing game for less than their projections that week. And if you pick up to 8, that's how you 100x your payout on Sleeper. It's called the Hail Mary. So if you use promo code Underworld, you get a $100 instant deposit match. Check out Sleeper's terms and conditions for details. These Sleeper picks are live in over 25 states. Yeah, buddy.
All right. Fun
I gotta say this. I wish I were as confident and as sure about anything as Matt Kelly is on everything.
Matt does those
that
in one.
Facts.
Matt does those in one take. Scott, he's natural on the ads. But give him a big
He is.
shout out.
Yeah, we had him on one of my podcasts last year, and he was just. I basically just hit record and asked him like 3 questions, and he talked for the rest of the hour, and it was awesome. It was fantastic. He's not always right, but he's never in doubt, man. And God love that guy.
And I'll give Matt some big props because people love calling him out when he's incorrect. But
He owns it.
we were all over ACHANE last week in like the Roto Underworld. We had Sonic Truth Pod on Friday, and we begged people to make trades for him, begged people to do whatever they could to get ACHANE on their team. Alan Slaslowski was also big on ACHANE, so there's been some positives with that. But Scott, how it is, it's like if you get something right, a few people will say great job, but if you get something wrong, 1,000 people come out of the woodwork that didn't even listen to the show. So, but big shout out to Matt. Matt got ACHANE very correct, and yeah, we hit on a bunch of these rookies, so it's gone very.
By the way, I guess he's come out, the rookie, and said it's ACHANE. Actually, it's not
I
ACHANE.
saw that.
It's hard for me to say that. I was ready for ACHANE. It just
ACHANE sounds so much better. He's
It
got
does so much better. Come on, he's going to pronounce his name in a way that's better for the common good.
Yeah,
and you talk about. I just have to laugh at this, but you talk about you get something right, nobody remembers. You get something wrong, people follow you around. So last week I had Thielen on my sleeper list. I ranked him higher than the market did. And somebody asked me a question. I do a Q&A, start sit, an hour before. And you're trying to answer as many questions as you can. And one of the questions I was asked was, should I start my flex Brian Robinson or Adam Thielen? And I said it was a tough call. I think a lot of people just would have slam dunk Robinson. And I said, look, I'm going to give you a weak vote to Robinson. I gave my rationale. And, of course, Thielen had a blow-up game. Robinson played fine with the work he was given, but the game got out of hand. He only had 10 carries. We know he's not getting a little bit more pass work this year, but generally, he's a 2-down pounder. So Thielen was the winning play. I gave up Robinson. So the guy writes me back. He's like, oh, I knew I shouldn't have listened to you. I'll never do that again, which is fine. Look, people can be mad. Everybody wants to win. I get it. So I just thought, I was curious, like, did I blow this? Should I have said Thielen? And I went over to Fantasy Pros, and they have a Who Should I Start feature where you can get everybody in the industry who has their rankings over there. You can get their opinion. So I said, okay, well, let's go to half PPR and blah, blah, blah. Okay, Robinson versus Thielen. And I got 55 answers from the industry. 55-0 would play Brian Robinson per their rank. So I was the unlucky one who had the question asked to him. If he had asked any of 54 other people, they would have been just as dumb as I was. And then the kicker to this, whatever. I mean, I take this with a grain of salt because you can't be in this industry without dealing with people kicking you in the shins. It's part of it. But then I look at his Twitter profile, and it's like, oh, no regrets, man, no regrets. I'm like, oh, okay, no regrets unless I ask a stranger for fantasy advice on the internet, then I have a lot of regrets. So, anyway,
I would have gone Brian Robinson as well. Dan, you would have gone B-Rob 100%.
100%. And not only that, I had that exact dilemma in one of my leagues, and I went Robinson. So,
there you go.
There it is.
57-0, Brian Robinson. And
yes.
It's funny. I do like Robinson. I just don't know. Sam Howell, I'm just afraid he's going to shipwreck that passing game. And we've loved McLaurin for years. And when I heard that McLaurin was working out with Doug Baldwin a couple of years ago, I just got so excited because McLaurin's such a technically sound player. He's such a smart player. He wants to maximize his skills. And I fell in love with Dotson over the summer. I'm like, maybe Dotson's better than McLaurin. He has more touchdown upside. And it's at the point now where I'm just hoping that maybe Howell is as good as the bad quarterbacks they've had the last few years. I don't think there's any upside there anymore.
I wouldn't be. I think that they're showing a ton of confidence in Howell because they have Philadelphia. They have a huge NFC East game coming up. But if it looks as bad as Buffalo, I don't know how you can't consider Jacoby Brissett with the start that they had in the first 2 games. If you're 2-2 and everything completely unravels, and you've got a veteran who's seen a lot, I don't know how you don't consider that change if it's that bad.
And they're paying Brissett. Brissett is one of the highest paid backups in the league too. So they brought him
especially
in
with how he looked last year.
You might play, sure.
Brissett was, he actually held Amari Cooper up. It was Cooper was a 5th round pick and last year, and we ended up being pretty happy if you took him there in the 5th round because he definitely more than returned that cost. And that's with the Brissett at quarterback and Deshaun Watson, just playing like crap. So yeah, I'm definitely hoping for Brissett there for sure. But
Team old receiver, by the way. I mean, not that he's quote unquote old, but he's a boring veteran. Nobody goes in their draft like, okay, I can get me some Amari Cooper, man. Amari Cooper's going to be the player I'm overweight on. And it's funny. A lot of people I respect are really high in Elijah Moore. I don't dislike Elijah Moore, but I'll throw a dated reference here. Amari Cooper's the Mary, and Elijah Moore's the Rhoda, man. You know, there's a 1 and a 2 here. They are not co-1s.
I don't even know what show that is. You guys have to explain that to me. Hey, I'm going to try to I'm going to take a guess. Is that like Mary and Rhoda? Is that like a Happy Days? I'm going to guess.
Same era. About the same era.
Okay. So from now on, guys, the references have to be. I'm going to set it at 1994 and on.
Okay. I can do 90s.
Yes.
No problem.
Okay. Late 90s, I can hang. Late 90s.
I have to ask you, did I lose you guys with that holes reference in the chat?
I didn't know what it was.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I figured that after I put it out there, I was like, wait a second, that was from when my kids were watching movies in the early 2000s, and that probably just doesn't quite apply for you guys. So it was one of those movies. It was just, you know, like a strange kids movie, but it was actually kind of weirdly good too. So, you know, when the kids were watching that, I was like, oh, okay, I'll actually watch this as opposed to, you know, the 8003 play of Monsters Incorporated. Or
well, that's how you stay current, man. You have kids, then you care about current culture. You know, when we were talking, Matt Harmon, my Yahoo colleague, and I, we do a show on Sunday night where we debrief what just happened. And when we talked a little bit of Taylor Swift, I can name 2 Taylor Swift songs.
I think you might be ahead of me on that, though.
Yeah.
Quick question. In my waiver wire column, I always reference Yahoo, so I know this off the top of my head. Quentin Johnston is rostered in 32% of Yahoo leagues. Josh Palmer is only rostered in 4. So Josh Palmer is probably going to go for a little bit more, but he's rostered in more leagues. Where are you at in a fab or a rolling list? Take it however you want, Scott. How would you prioritize Josh Palmer, and your thoughts on Quentin Johnston? Do you have a favorite here? How do you see this playing out for the Mike Williams replacement role?
I feel like Palmer is the baseball player who walks a lot and may hit a single, may hit the occasional double. And Johnston can be a home run but might strike out a lot. He's like Adam Dunn or somebody like that. So a little bit, and this is such a cop-out answer, but my approach to this might be what am I trying to do? What's my objective here? If I really just need a nice playable wide receiver 3/4, I think Palmer is perfectly that. If I have a really good roster and I just want the best player with the most explosive upside, I would have to go Johntson. And again, that's extremely convenient to say, well, both guys, depending on where you're at. But this game is contextual, and I think this particular question falls in there. If I needed somebody to get on base, I would go Palmer, and Johnson's the more variable upside boom bust pick.
Pretty much exactly what I said. And I have Palmer a little bit lower. Like, I saw a couple people rating him as like the number 1 waiver wire ad. You know, I would prefer a couple of these upside younger players, like Marvin Mims is available in a lot of Yahoo leagues.
Marvin Mims. We could have done the whole show on Marvin Mims.
Dan's got some questions. I'll let Dan, you segue us into the Marvin Mims question, and then we got to come back when we talk Miami. There's a great question in the chat. Let's not forget about that one, guys. But Dan, why don't you take us away?
All right, yeah. So, you know, obviously the Dolphins were the big story this week, and you know, the incompetence of the Broncos, and you know, all of that. You know, ACHANE and Raheem Mostert, you know, putting together the most fantasy points of any running back duo ever in the history of fantasy football, as far as I'm aware. I don't know if anybody's researched that, but I sure can't think of any time that we got 2 guys that were right up around 50 points in a PPR. But then, probably the most frustrating thing out of anything for anybody who's as heavy into Marvin Mims as I am, and that might be nobody who's that heavy into Marvin Mims. I'm like over 30% into Marvin Mims on my team. So, you know, this is a big deal for me. But is there anybody that's got a more frustrating usage right now than Marvin Mims that you guys can think of? And what do you think, Scott? Or, you know, is Peyton going to figure this out, or is he just going to keep, you know, pounding his head against the wall and trotting out the same old team?
It comes down to the assumption of rational coaching, and I have to believe that Peyton is not just smart enough, but he's competitive enough that he's not going to keep running out this specialty usage for Marvin Mims. It reminds me a little bit. and I'm just calling it up now, of when Nick Chubb was a rookie for the Browns. I will never forget this, although I just wanted to call it up to be exact. He hardly plays his first 3 games. He gets 3 carries, he gets 2 carries, he gets 2 carries. And then week 4, they play at Oakland. And Nick Chubb has 3 carries for 105 yards and 2 touchdowns. He rips off 2 long touchdown runs. And this is back in 2018. And we all write, okay, well, the Nick Chubb unveiling is here. The genie's out of the bottle. Surely Nick Chubb is here to stay. Pick him up if you can. Play him next week. Again, 3 for 105 and 2. The next week he gets 3 carries for 2 yards. The week after that he gets 3 carries for 25 yards. I mean, how is that? That doesn't make any sense. If that was an SAT question, everybody would get it wrong. Mims, all Mims does is make splash plays. He makes splash plays in the passing game. He makes splash plays in the return game. They've actually tried to get him going as a runner a couple of times, and that hasn't exploded yet. But this is a team. The next great Broncos team is down the road. They're in evaluation mode, right? And they weren't really sure if they wanted to bring Courtland Sutton back or not. And maybe Jerry Jeudy at this point, who I've always kind of been a little bit sympathetic to, probably an eyelash of a disappointment given that he was a first-round pick and you expect those players to be special, and maybe Jerry Jeudy's just a good player, and of course he has to prove he can stay on the field. This season should be about evaluating and developing people like Marvin Mims, who they traded up to get. So it wasn't like, oh, who do we take? I don't know. Well, this Mims guy is here. Let's take him. They targeted him, went after him, got him. He's making splash plays, and he's getting, 25% snap shares. He's running just a sprinkling of routes every week. If this were Hugh Jackson running the team, I think Hugh Jackson was running that Browns team I spoke of. I'm not positive that's correct. Obviously, the clown car that the Broncos had last year running the team, which was awful. I think about the Patriots clown car they had last year with Matt Patricia and Joe Judge. I'd understand it. Dumb people, stupid is as stupid does, right? Why assume when somebody shows you they're an idiot or misguided or stubborn? And sometimes we see this, right, with remember when Thomas Jones and Jamal Charles were the backs in Kansas City, Charles would spike on limited usage. And you wonder if Todd Haley thought, well, we're using him the right amount. Look how well he plays. Let's not mess with that. But this is an obvious case of, look, the Broncos stink. You just got beat by 50. You have one guy leaping off the page. Sean Payton's not a dumb guy. I am going to approach Mims, whether it's in free agency, if you're in a really shallow league, he's not drafted yet, starting him this week. I'm going to approach him as like, Sean Payton can't unsee this. Sean Payton is going to see the light. Sean Payton wanted this guy all along, and this is going to be something we laugh about really soon when Marvin Mims is a locked-in fantasy starter in just about every league.
It's kind of a little bit like Tyreek Hill's rookie season, where he makes the really big special teams plays, gets deep, and then every game he starts seeing a higher kind of snap share, and they were very successful with Hill on the rushing attempts his rookie year. But the fact that they're trying to get Mims the ball, I think that Sean Payton's not a dummy, and I think that this is going to happen. I think by, I'll say like week 6, he's in our lineup every single week. I think the next few weeks could be a little bit annoying just in terms of usage, but he's electric, and this offense needs a spark. They need an identity, and I think Marvin Mims being a big part of the offense has to be part of the game plan for Sean Payton.
Yeah, the story I'm telling myself, and I don't know if this is right or wrong, is that Payton really wants to trade Jeudy, and so he's trying to highlight Jeudy. He doesn't want Mims overshadowing him, so he's trying to minimize Mims while he's highlighting Jeudy. And once he gets that trade done, then boom, it's wheels up for Mims.
Or maybe they could even trade Courtland Sutton too, who's actually been quasi-productive. I hadn't even thought about that. And when you said, Dan, that you were overweight on Mims, that just tells me I didn't talk to you enough, or I didn't engage your work enough in the summer. Because when you come up with your takes, invariably we always. I feel most preseasons we compare notes, we agree on a lot of stuff, but there's always a few guys that you're like, oh, I hadn't considered that player, or I wasn't as locked in on this guy as I should be. And in the case of Mims, if you liked Mims where he was going in drafts, you could come away with a huge look. You can't, if you like an early round player, a lot of it is going to depend on what draft slots you follow, because some players just won't fit certain draft slots. I get it, or certain roster builds. But if you liked Marvin Mims, you should come away with a heavy Marvin Mims portfolio. And I kicking myself for not tapping your brain more like we usually do preseason. That's the old Pianow is winning here. The new Pianow is losing. I don't like that. But I love I don't know if it's true or not, but what you outlined with the trade and the showcasing and all that, it sounds so plausible. And isn't it cool, as my dogs bark in the background, isn't that cool? Isn't it cool that we live in a world now in the NFL that trades actually do happen in season? They used to be so infrequent. Everybody was afraid to do something, and then players would come, they'd change teams. It would be like they were dropped in from a different country. They didn't speak the language. Now teams will make trades, and we know teams need receivers, right? There are some good teams right now who are screaming for a quality receiver where a Sutton or a Judy would make sense. So I like that. I like that showcase. Remember, there's people think maybe the Cardinals are showcasing Zach Ertz. They want to – somebody needs a catch-and-fall tight end. Well, here's Zach Ertz is, right? I like that. Bottom line, I think we're all in agreement that Marvin Mims, this picture is going to develop. I don't know when it's going to be. It's going to be soon. Now, this week is the wrong, this is Marvin Mims week in the industry. So it's not, I don't want to act like we're giving you a unique take that Marvin Mims is on the rise, but I would buy high. Even if the price was rising, I would still meet that price. I think Marvin, you're going to be glad you have Marvin Mims at some point this season. And when I say that, I don't mean like December 15th. Oh, there it is. I mean, like in October, you're going to be like, I'm so glad I have that guy.
I looked while we were talking. I tried to see if I could show up Dan. Dan said I have more Marvin Mims than anyone. Mm-hmm. I thought maybe I'm north of 30%. No, I'm 23%. So Dan, you win this round for sure on Mims ownership.
Yeah, it would be hard for anybody to beat me on that one. I was, as Scott said, he's a player that if you want a lot of him, you can get a lot of him, and I definitely wanted a lot. So I did get a lot. I'm just looking up my Mims exposure for sure here, but
while you're looking that up, we saw in the chat. I want to mention in the chat that a couple of speculation shades were thrown out. Jerry Jeudy to the Patriots. I think I'd rather see him retire than play for the Patriots because that would basically end Jerry Judy's career. And Jerry Jeudy to the Chiefs. I just don't know if an in-division trade is ever that likely. But did you guys play Chiefs receiver roulette this summer? It's like, did you talk yourself into Tony? Did you talk yourself into Rice? Did you talk yourself into Stephon Page or Dwayne Bowe? Or
I have some Sky Moore.
Okay,
I talked myself into some Sky Moore, and I ended up with a not a ton, but I have some Sky Moore in redraft and in Dynasty. And
I don't feel bad about that.
I'm intrigued by him and Rice.
Me too.
I think the fact that those two guys are kind of pointing up. Rice is a really fun guy to add tonight on waivers. He's available in a bunch of leagues still, and the box score doesn't show. They overturned a touchdown for him. Mm-hmm. He looked really good on it. So his week could have been a lot bigger. So I'm kind of into it. I think like Kelsey with the two the wide receivers I think we want on the field for them with Moore and Rice. I'm kind of into it. I think one of those guys, when we get a little bit further into the season, is going to be a weekly starter. You look at kind of what Juju did, and Juju was kind of dust last year. I think one of those guys could put up better weekly numbers than him for sure.
It was crazy that Mahomes won the MVP last year, and Kelsey was, the dominant tight end that he always is. And the only other player who really came in was McKinnon late. Pacheco was okay. You made your money back on Pacheco. You made a little bit of profit, but nothing that moved the needle. And the receivers were the useless 900 yards and 3 touchdowns that Juju had. It doesn't make any sense to me. If I went to bet, missed the whole football season, I'm like, hey guys, tell me what I missed. Well, Mahomes won the MVP and Kelsey was great. I'm like, okay, what receiver came with him? Well, really none of them. Like, well, how's that possible? Did Mahomes run for 9 touchdowns or something? Actually, Mahomes was a better runner last year, but so I kept thinking it's Mahomes. It's the simplest thing in the world. It's Occam's razor. Simplest explanation, so often correct. Patrick Mahomes is awesome. Andrew Reid is a wizard. Somebody has to pop here in the receiver room, and I think Sky Moore is probably the guy I would want to. I got a little bit of cold feet, so I'm probably average weight on Moore, and I have a sprinkling of the other guys. I think I almost have one of the other guys somewhere just so in case it happens. At least I'm not totally shut out, like these wasted FOMO picks in the back of my roster. But it's just funny that this offense can exist the way that it does.
Yeah, the one thing I liked about the Patriots receivers is none of them were going to break the bank on you, as far as draft capital. So I ended up about double weight on Sky Moore. I was probably about 1.5 weight on Rashee Rice, and then underweight on pretty much everybody else. And I definitely undersold my Mims. I looked it up. I'm at 46.5% Mims.
Wow. So. At this point, I'm surprised you didn't go to Baylor or something. I was trying to figure this out.
You would think so, but
Big 12. Big 12 for now.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, let's talk about something that Scott kind of alluded to a little bit earlier. CJ Stroud is looking just fantastic in Houston. That whole offense. I mean, I think for me, seeing Houston be that good that quick was definitely a surprise. I was cautiously optimistic on Stroud going into the season. Like Superflex. I was picking up Stroud late as a second or third quarterback or whatever, but it wasn't anything that I was really touching in single quarterback. And wow, I'm very impressed with what Houston's doing on offense and what he's doing. As you said, Scott, with an offensive line that's just basically lawn chairs at best in front of him, and he's doing all this. So thoughts on Houston, Tank Dell, Stroud, anywhere you want to go.
One of the five most impressive players that I've seen. The idea is that you throw him in there, you throw him in the deep end, see if he can swim. They threw him into a tidal wave and said, "Okay, don't drown, kid." And he's like, "Don't drown. I'm going to surf." I mean, he looks so good. You don't even have to be a football fan to appreciate what he's doing. Just avoiding negative plays, and he's so calm in the pocket, and just having the awareness to step to quiet spots in the pocket, not drop his eyes to the rush. And it's so hard to know some of this stuff because life in the Big Ten, Ohio State, and I'm a Michigan guy, but Ohio State's a juggernaut. They've had the best receiver group. Their receiver groups have been so great that Jameson Williams had to skip towns he could play, which is mind-blowing, right? Jameson Williams, I'm not going to play here. I'll go to Alabama where maybe there's an opening. But, just the Garrett Wilson and Olave and Harrison and JSN, it's just been ridiculous. And so you wonder sometimes when these players aren't under duress as much as we'd like to see, it's hard to know how will they handle stress, how will they handle going into a situation where the guys aren't wide freaking open like they are at Ohio State, where your shirt has to get laundered after the game when it maybe didn't for half of the Ohio State schedule. And again, if I'm Carolina, I would be – and I don't dislike Bryce Young. I'm kind of neutral on Young, but I would be petrified I took the wrong guy. Now, unfortunately, even if you were pro Stroud, in your standard leagues, it's just what's the payoff, right? I mean, you weren't going to draft him as a starter. I do have Stroud on some Superflex teams where I thought he'd be playable. I had no idea he'd be this good. I don't think anybody did. On one of my better teams, I have Kirk Cousins, I have Tua, I have Stroud. And I, like everybody else, I could use better running backs. I have Garrett Wilson on that team. I've accepted Garrett Wilson is now quasi-playable. So I'm prepared to go to quarterback-needy teams and say, who do you want? If some people say, well, just trade Stroud high, right? Well, no. I'll go to the other person. Who do you want? Do you want Kirk Cousins in the Carnival with a horrible defense and the 11 indoor games? Great. Let's pay up for Cousins. Do you want Tua with that track team around him? Great. Pay up for Tua. I'm willing to trade those guys because I believe in Stroud. Now, I would want a lot for Cousins, who's going to be a great fantasy player, better than real life. I'd obviously want a lot for Tua. We know just how explosive they look. And if Tua stays healthy, I mean, he's the MVP favorite right now for crying out loud. But if somebody comes up with a really strong running back or receiver for one of those guys, and I have to live with two quarterbacks only in Superflex, one of them being CJ Stroud, I am totally fine with that. And thankfully, I'm overweight on Collins. Thankfully, I was early. I wasn't the earliest person to tank Dell, because if I was, I would have drafted him a lot. But I did proactively go after him in some guillotine leagues. I went after him as a free agent, actually, not even as a guy who was killed. But I'm over on Tank Dell. I'm over on Nico Collins. I even think Robert Woods in bye season, even though their pass distribution right now is pretty even, I think Dell and Collins are going to run away with that. Woods will maybe be a little bit de-emphasized, but they don't throw a lot to the tight ends. They don't throw a lot to the running backs. I think all three of these guys are playable. Bottom line is this. CJ Stroud, oh my freaking God. I could not be more over the moon for this kid.
664 passing yards the last 2 weeks. Big win over Jacksonville. And I think what's wild is he's had all this passing volume, and he hasn't thrown a single interception. You talked about the offensive line. I mean, this offensive coordinator, I don't know, the Mike McDaniel, when he took over Miami, people thought it was going to be like a de facto Shanahan offense, and he totally changed it. This guy, Bobby Slowick, comes over from San Francisco, and he's got them in 11 personnel all the time. Dell, Collins, Woods. They're playing three wide out, and Stroud is excelling. So we had him higher than Bryce Young all summer long, both on Sonic Truth Pod, Go District, you name it. Like, I think we were all over that. But I said he could be like a Kirk Cousins. I think he could be like a Joe Burrow. Like he's that level of quarterback. I'm so impressed with CJ
Love
Stroud.
that. I love you putting that out there, and I agree. I thought Cousins before the season would have been a great comp, but I think we have to raise the ceiling higher at this point. And also about coaches, the best coaches work personnel to scheme, and the bad coaches say, "This is my scheme, and we're going to run this no matter what." The best coaches say, "Well, who do I have here?" And if we have to go 2 tight ends, we go 2 tight ends. If we have to be a power running team, we're a power running team. We have to be 3 wide and throw it all over the lot, we'll do that. And also, and again, I'm amazed that Stroud's not throwing picks. I'm amazed he didn't take a sack last week. But it also underscores, and I don't want to hear this stuff like, oh, well, David Carr got the confidence beat out of him because the offensive line was so bad. Sacks are more of a quarterback stat than they are an offensive line stat. If you have a horrible line, that's bad. I get it. But every blitz has an indicator. Quarterbacks set protections. Quarterbacks can hold the ball too long. Sometimes they trust their athleticism too much, Sam Howell. Quarterback sacks are more about the quarterback than the line. Let's just leave it at that. I think that should be an accepted maxim to anybody who plays football or watches football, and for some reason it isn't yet.
Yeah, Scott, you've been preaching that for over 20 years, without a doubt. And, that's one of the things I've definitely taken from you is looking at sacks that way. The other thing I think that's really important is, the truly great quarterbacks, almost all of them were good just right out of the box. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're seeing with Stroud. Everybody talks about, you got to give quarterbacks time to develop. Yeah, for an average talent, that's probably true. But the ones that are great tend to just come right out of the box and start firing and looking great immediately. So, Stroud is doing that. So I'll tell you what, if you're in a Dynasty league and you can get a hold of Stroud, now is the time to do so. Buy high because the price isn't going down. If you want to take a chance, you can maybe wait until after the Pittsburgh game this week and hope that, he has an off game and that brings down the price for you a little bit. But I'll tell you what, you don't want to wait much longer than that to get a hold of him because the price is just going to continue to go up.
Dan, what are you paying in an FFPC single quarterback Dynasty league? Not Superflex.
I mean, I would happily trade a second for him, but I'm afraid it might take more than that. I think a move that might end up looking very sharp down the line, but feels a little scary to do right now is trade Fields for him. Because we think, Fields is going to get the running going. He's going to start putting up some 35, 40 point weeks. But what if he doesn't?
I think it'd be hard to execute that. I think the Stroud manager is going to be like, I don't want to go near Fields. That team, that team is on fire right now. And what if the Bears are the worst team in football? Won't they have to draft Caleb Williams?
Yeah, we moved Stroud ahead of Fields in Dynasty like a couple of days ago, and I think in redraft, if you had to bet on the one that's going to finish inside the top 12 for the rest of the season, I think it's Stroud. I think it's clearly Stroud. He's already well ahead. We like the offensive scheme more. We probably like the supporting pieces more. Mm-hmm. Like I think like those guys, we want a lot out of DJ Moore. But Tank Dell's doing what we wanted DJ Moore to do, and Nico Collins is worth more than any other receiver on that offense. So I don't know. I think it's Stroud in everywhere.
There's so much dysfunction with the Bears right now. They've hit that great concept, the Tyson zone, where like any headline about Mike Tyson you would believe is at least somewhat plausible. That's where I'm at with the Bears now. You told me anything. Look what happened last week with their defensive coordinator. Resigns under some really sketchy circumstances. We don't really know what happens. There may have been an FBI raid. Apparently, like $100,000 of equipment was stolen. Fields kind of popped off about being frustrated by the play calling. You could tell me any headline related to the Chicago Bears right now. Make up anything crazy you want. Put it on the National Enquirer. I'd be like, there's a chance that's true. Yeah,
totally true. So let's switch gears just a little bit. I want to throw a question from somebody up here. We said we were going to talk about this fantasy season and, kind of the lens coming into focus. And I think this is a good way to kind of address that. Should we be trying to trade off players like Mostert or James Conner, or are these guys that you're just riding? Scott?
Mostert is a really difficult call because, one, I just always loved the guy. I was back when I used to do the breakfast table with Mike Selfie, we were really in on Mostert when he popped for San Francisco, and he was good to us. But he's at an age that's not good for a running back. He's had a million injuries, and they have other talent there. Even at his best, the ACHANE, however you want to say it, that genie's out of the bottle. There's no way they're turning back from that. And at some point, Jeff Wilson's going to come back. He'll have a role in this offense. They're obviously going to throw the ball a lot. So it's going to be, even if you're pro Mostert, and even if he stays healthy, there's just going to be games where he gets 9 touches or 11 touches, and you got to hope something pops with that. Then again, so you're going to think, well, trade him. But then anybody you trade him to is going to be like, well, how old is he? How many times has he played a full season? What did ACHANE just do last week? I almost feel like he's a forced hold because I'd want a decent return for him. I'm not going to trade him willy-nilly. I'm not going to trade him for Drake London or something at this point, which doesn't sound crazy, right? I mean, if we told you a month ago, oh yeah, you could trade Raheem Mostert for Drake London, how quickly would you do that? It's like, or for Garrett Wilson or something like that. You just can't do those things now. But nobody expects a full season from him. So it sounds like a wishy-washy answer, and I'm curious to see what everybody else thinks. But I think Mostert's a forced hold right now.
You're just not getting the value back in return because everybody's expecting some sort of a drop in production. So if I'm winning, unless I have a huge hole in a position and I'm like stacked at running back, then I'm probably just holding him and riding it out. You worry about Mostert because he's only had 2 full seasons. And the rest of his career has been he's played like a half of a season. But he was completely healthy last year. He's completely healthy now. It's the perfect scheme for him. And he's producing at an unbelievable rate. So, I don't know. Connor's a little different because this team, I think that Arizona is fighting for everything. I'm actually really impressed by Gannon and their approach. They could be 3-0. I was one of these people that thought Gannon was like a clown doing all the sound effects. I think maybe we read him wrong, and it's another coach that we just had a bad first impression, but he actually kind of gets it. Connor has broken down before on us. Connor's in a great situation now, and I think that the competitive nature of the team is great, but if they do start 1-7, they could make changes. I might be more apt to move on from Connor, and I do think you might get a more level-headed read on Connor. Because Mostert, I think everybody thinks the production is going to fall off at least a little bit in terms of your league mates. What do you think?
I co-sign. Let me just say quickly, I co-sign everything you say about Arizona. I thought, and maybe they have a Dan Campbell situation where it's the sound bites sound a little bit, hucksterish at times, or he's like a car salesman. But that team plays hard, as you mentioned. They're 2 or 3 plays away from being 3-0. I had Washington as my first week Survivor pick. And not to mention, I had all the Johntson ready to go, and that game aged me. That game frustrated me so much, and then I rewatched it the next day, and it frustrated me all over again. And I came out of it thinking Arizona plays hard, and then they had the Giants beat, they let the Giants win, whatever, and they beat a good Dallas team. I know they got Dallas at the right time with all the injuries, and Dallas really kind of played an entitled game for 3 hours, but still they play hard. They're well coached, and I thought they were going to be the worst team in football. They're not anything close to that right now.
Yeah. So going back to Mostert, I guess my thought on that is if I've got Mostert and I can trade him off for any kind of decent return, I'm probably going to do that just because of the fact that with Jeff Wilson coming back, I'm not worried about ACHANE. I think that's more of a danger to Mostert than it is to ACHANE. And also with Mostert's injury history, everything else. And Connor, I'm more likely to just ride him, for all the reasons that we just mentioned here. And, just to kind of comment on the coaching staff and, the Gannon sound bites. And we talked about, Campbell last year and all that. One of my working theories that I'm going with now is that, with these coaches, when they come in, we're only seeing, tiny little sound bites, tiny little slices of what's going on there. And a lot of those are put out by people who may have an agenda that's very different from what our agenda is. And, so I'm just a little bit less trusting of, is what I'm seeing representative of the whole picture, or is somebody out there putting it out there because they don't like this guy, or they want to put this kind of slant on him or whatever. So I guess I'm just a little bit more willing to just, let things play out before I start pigeonholing coaches in any particular direction.
That's such a great point.
Nick Sirianni got a lot of flack early on too. Mm-hmm. People didn't like the initial reactions to Sirianni were not strong either. So I think that's an awesome point, Dan. And there's in no other profession. I mean, there's different guys can lead the locker room. You think about like how opposite like a Mike McDaniel and a Dan Campbell are, and they're both like, doing fantastic jobs this year, completely won over their locker room. So different ways to skin a cat.
For sure. I always feel like with a coach, a successful head coach, I want him to be either the most emotionally inspiring person he can be or the smartest guy in the room, and everybody knows it, right? Because I don't think Bill Belichick's giving a lot of rah-rah speeches, but everybody knows what he's done and his gravitas. And although him being cranky to the media, that plays a lot better when you're 11-5 than maybe when you're 6-8.
You sound like a jerk now.
Yeah, he just sounds like a grunchy old man now, right?
Yeah.
But and also a lot of times we don't know the value of the assistant coaches. Coaching is so huge in the NFL, and not just head coaching, but a lot of times the star of the quarterback room, it could be the coordinator, it could be the position coach. And nobody knew who Sean McVay was 10 years ago, right? I mean, he was a rising star who was a position coach. He wasn't even a coordinator when he was in Washington, I don't think. And these guys came out of nowhere. Remember, very well, Dan, Mike Tomlin was in Minnesota, right? And he wasn't a defensive coordinator, right? He was a position coach. And people thought he was maybe Pittsburgh was over its skis when they hired Tomlin, but he blew them away in the interview. And it's funny. I actually know Steelers
I was
fans
so mad when we retained Childress.
Right,
Tomlin go. I mean,
sure.
My gosh.
And Dan and I, we sadly he hasn't been in my hometown league for a few years, but for years Dan was nicknaming his team after one of the worst head coaches in the league. Like what it was weekend at Tom Sula's and weekend at Wisenhunt's, right? Ken
Yes.
Wisenhunt, right? But you guys make great points. We're not in the locker room, and we're not privy to so much that you need to make an informed choice. And I think with Arizona, it was fine to say this looks like a weak roster. I don't want to draft into it and all that. But I just went so far with it. Like it's going to be look up below. They're going to be 2-15. They're going to be a joke, and they're not a joke at all. They're a competitive football team. That means I probably missed out on a good O'Connor opportunity or a good Hollywood Brown opportunity because there's a buoyancy to this team that I didn't give enough of a chance of that happening in the preseason.
Yeah, I got really thrown off when they did the Josh Dobbs trade because then I was like, oh man, they are really looking to tank now. I did not give Dobbs the credit that he probably deserves. So
Same.
Yeah, it's one of those things you look back and say, well, now I know. Won't read it wrong the next time. So let's talk about another situation that's going to be, I think, really interesting coming up, and that's the running back in Indianapolis. Right now we've got Zach Moss, Bellcow. Did you ever think you'd hear those words put together, Scott? And
definitely
now JT, he's eligible to come off the PUP after week 4 is finished. So one more week he can be off the PUP. And I think there's a lot of fascinating questions around it. Are the Colts even going to activate him when they can? Because it's up to them to activate. It's not JT doesn't decide, the Colts decide. Is there a trade market for JT still, or is that pretty much evaporated? Can they resolve their differences? Is JT a buy low or a sell high for fantasy? I mean, where are we going with all this, Scott?
I think it's possible that the damage between Taylor and the Colts is impossible to repair at this point. And the Colts are 2-1. It's really simplistic, but a big determination in whether or not teams change things or make radical changes is, are you winning or are you losing, right? If you don't like what Arthur Smith is selling in Atlanta, you need them to lose games. So he looks in the mirror and says, maybe I'm doing it wrong. When they're winning, they're not going to make changes. Zach Moss looks better than I ever expected. And, I couldn't believe it last week. I mean, look, he got a lot of carries. He ran the ball well. I think we all knew that was in his range of outcomes. He had a great touchdown catch. I thought Zach Moss couldn't catch a cold, right? I thought he had absolutely no receiving chops. And I'm embarrassed to say that the first week I gave out some Deion Jackson, and I had some Deion Jackson, just like, well, he's the only guy here, and he's going to get those 15 or 20 touches. They sure gave Deion Jackson an opportunity, and man, he played about as bad of a football game as you could play, and to the point that they've since moved on from him completely, which is reasonable. I mean, you're not a good football player when they think Trey Sermon is an upgrade over you, but I think Zach Moss, I don't have a lot of Zach Moss, and it's a disappointment for me because I think they certainly made the right coaching hire, right? I'm a big believer in it. The funny thing is right now, I like everything the Colts are selling, except I don't like Irsay, right? He's a kook and he's a hothead and he has to understand the PR part of the job. And he gives off the wrong impression a lot of times. He shoots from the hip and says things he probably shouldn't say. And even if the Taylor thing, even if it gets nasty privately, you just shouldn't air that all out in public. And the way they've handled that, don't close the door. Don't piss off the player. Don't make him want to sit out the season just to spite you guys. I think Taylor may want to do that. Bottom line is this. I don't have a lot of Zach Moss. I think there's a good chance Zach Moss is a long-term story, and it's killing me that I'm not in on it.
Yeah, I'm not buying Taylor ever returning to the Colts. I think that if anything, he'll get traded if they get the right package, and I think some team might get desperate and make a move for JT. Like Scott referenced, teams are more kind of apt to trade. We know teams were making offers, and Indianapolis did not accept. So, yeah, I'm with you also on Zach Moss, but like Moss has not had more than 125 touches in any season, and they're giving it to him every time, and they're using him in the passing game. So I don't know. I think as long as he holds up, he's going to be really, really, really helpful. But the Trey Sermon signing is funny because they give him carries right out the gate. It's a guy that's been so bad in the NFL, but I don't know. I want to have some Trey Sermon on some deep rosters. I just, I don't know.
I feel like I blew it with Michael Pittman too. I should have had more faith in Shane Steichen.
Pittman has looked great, and a lot of that really comes down to Anthony Richardson looking better than what we thought he did, what we thought he might as a passer. As far as JT goes, I mean, I guess my thoughts on it are this. He has a ton of incentive to at least want to get 6 games in somewhere.
Total the season, yep.
Yeah, because he does not want his contract to roll over. So he's, I think there's going to be a certain point where even if the Colts play hardball, JT is going to have to just, check his ego at the door and say, guys, I'd really like to help your team and be active and play. And I think they might take him up on it, though I guess with Irsay being enough of a wild card, he could just say, you know what, just go sit in a corner, we're not going to activate you. But then I think they're risking a grievance and everything else. So, I think somehow, some way JT's going to get in at least 6 games. I don't know where. Might be with the Colts, might be with somebody else. Moss being a bell cow in college, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't he have a ton of run with Utah?
Yeah, Utah.
He was pretty heavily there. So
big time there.
Yeah, I'm a little less worried about him being able to hold up long term. I think he'll probably be able to do that. He's definitely got the build for it. So we'll see though. Let's move on to Green Bay real quick. Just a very simple question: is Jordan Love for real?
I've been impressed. Look, what we talked earlier about Stroud, right? And, the horrible offensive line, the pieces around him are okay, but they're not great. The Packers have asked Jordan Love to play basically without no Christian Watson and with only 1 game of Aaron Jones. And I was never really the biggest A.J. Dillon fan, but his value to me has just he's a jag, man. He is. You're drafting him or playing him. This week Jones isn't playing. I mean, you're hoping for a touchdown because otherwise you're going to get 13 carries for 39 yards. That's the A.J. Dillon. He goes nowhere. That story goes nowhere, man. It's kind of like my introduction to this Packer theme here. But Jordan Love was thrown in kind of an impossible situation. Yeah, he had plenty of time to learn. But it's like, okay, well, you're inheriting. You're the next piece of the Favre-Rodgers legacy and a fan base that's extremely, I think, a little bit spoiled at times. And your best receiver is not going to play, and all of your receivers are young. And man, I'm so impressed with Love. And also, Sam Laporta is kind of the obvious, oh my God, rookie tight end, throw out the rules, he's great. And everybody's trying to outdo themselves with their hot takes on Laporta. But Musgrave is the poor man's Laporta right now. He's looked good every game. And he hasn't had that blow the cover game yet. Maybe he'll have it Thursday night. And if he does, it'll be with everybody watching. Maybe he outproduces Laporta. And then everybody, trips all over themselves to say how high they had Musgrave ranked 2 months ago, or whatever it was. But very impressed with Musgrave and very impressed with Jordan Love. I know there were some throws he liked back. He didn't play well for most of the game last week. But, I mean, New Orleans is a very good defense. And the fact that he pulled up the game and had a comeback win. I mean, Mac Jones is still stuck on 1 comeback win for the Patriots, for crying out loud. I wasn't a big Jordan Love guy 2 months ago. I'm not going to pound the table for him the way I am for C.J. Stroud, but I've certainly significantly upped my opinion of him over the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think he's interesting, Dan, because we haven't seen Christian Watson on the field. And I think Watson could kind of open up that offense a little bit more. I'm hopeful we see Watson Thursday night. But Love is producing well as a fantasy quarterback. He's got 7 touchdown passes, and he had the big comeback win the other day, which I think is significant. So I think the coaching staff might be getting more and more trust with him, and things could open up a little bit when they have, their alpha in Watson. So I like him. I
also want to say, I think LaFleur is the best NFL coach that nobody makes a big deal over.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say for sure. And the thing is with Love, a week ago, everybody was saying, his touchdown rate's unsustainable. This is, he's going to turn into a pumpkin in no time. And then all of a sudden you see how he did against the Saints. And again, as Scott said, we got no Christian Watson, no Aaron Jones. He's dealing with a situation that most quarterbacks would really struggle with. And he came in there and just, he's made it work. So I'm definitely giving him the benefit of the doubt. I drafted a lot of Love, just basically drafted Packers everywhere. I was very big into Luke Musgrave as well. Exactly like Scott was talking, is being kind of a discount Laporta, because in drafts, he was super, super cheap. I mean, last round or very close to it, unless you were in a tight end premium. And even in the tight end premiums, he was going pretty close to the last round for most of the offseason until people started waking up to him. But this was an offense where I was like, I liked all the individual skill players, like Aaron Jones, like Christian Watson. I like the potential of Jaden Reed, and I like the potential of Luke Musgrave. So I'm like, if I like all these guys, I should probably draft some Jordan Love too. So, I kind of lucked my way into that a little bit, but it's been working out well for sure.
Another feather in his cap is you did it last week without David Bakhtiari, who's one of the key pieces of their offensive line.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just move into a couple of the running backs real quick if we got time. You okay on time, Scott? Great. Theo, we okay to go just a little bit over here?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, sounds good. All right. So let's talk Eagles running backs real quick. This was an interesting situation going into the draft. Everybody had their theories, all that. DeAndre Swift has easily cracked 100 yards in each of the last 2 games, and if you got him, you're most likely playing him until he breaks. But has he entered your circle of trust yet, Scott?
I just think the Eagles feel like whatever they do is going to work. I think they feel the game will work. We know they love running Hurts at the goal line. Yeah. I sound like an old man here, but I really don't think that pushing your quarterback at the goal line thing is safe. I think it's good for football, but and I know Eagle fans are like, well, show you can stop it. You're just mad at us because our line's better and because Hurts is the man and all that stuff. Okay. But right now it's just the ultimate easy button. So it's hard. I think Swift would actually be a player I'd be trying to sell because he came in with a lot of draft capital. The Lions never really were all in on him. And then the new regime took over. They inherited Swift. They got their own version of Swift now in Gibbs, who's a first-round player who maybe is somewhat of a specialty or satellite player. The Eagles are an offense we want. They're a signature offense. The high-profile team. They went to the Super Bowl last year. They came within 2 or 3 plays of winning it. I think you could sell somebody on the idea that Swift is going to be the right answer here. And I think that there's going to be some weeks that Kenneth Gainwell's the right answer. And there's going to be some weeks that it's somebody else. And some weeks it's Hurts who gets all the rushing touchdowns. And here's my other thing about trading. Let's say you want to trade whoever it is. You want to trade Raheem Mostert. You want to trade DeAndre Swift, whoever it is. You don't scream out, hey, DeAndre Swift's playing really well. I want to trade him. You say, I like my running back room. I need some help. You got good receivers, Dan. I need some receivers. I got some good backs. You could use a back. Who do you like? Let them come to Mostert. Let them come to Swift. Or ask them, rank my running backs. You don't even have to agree with what they say. If they say something that you can leverage, great. If they say something you don't agree with, argue against it. Don't point to the right to the guy. Don't point to, you don't want them to pick the 5 of clubs. Don't stare at the 5 of clubs. Just throw them the whole deck and see what they come up with.
Yeah, kind of another way of looking at that too is, like in a lot of leagues where you don't really know the people that you're playing with that well, and you're just kind of throwing out trade offers blind. I like to throw out 2 or 3 similar offers, with 2 or 3 running backs like that, and just let them pick. hey, I'd be willing to do this deal, or this deal, which gets you the running back that you need, gets me the wide receiver that I need, and I might vary around the running back on a couple of them. I might vary around the receiver on a couple of them, and let's see what that person likes. Maybe they're just, they click no on all three of them, and you move on. But they might say, hey, I am interested in Swift, but I don't want to trade you Drake London, but I would trade you whoever. So you can a lot of times come to agreement like that.
Right, or you could say, which of my running backs would you trade for the receiver I'm trying to get? And
Right.
It's a case of, if they land on the guy you want, great. If they land on a guy you don't want, you just back away from it. You say, oh, okay, I think that's a little bit too much. So give them even the illusion of a choice. You mentioned actually giving them 3 offers. Sometimes just say, okay, which of my running backs would I have to trade to get, Jalen Waddle or whatever? And if they say the right answer, fine. If they don't say the right answer, then you go in a different direction.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And, in getting back just to the Eagles in particular, I think, I have a ton of Gainwell. I have some Swift, but I have a ton of Gainwell. And my thesis here was basically that, Swift is a guy who's done nothing but disappoint his NFL teams and his fantasy managers. Rashad Penny's a guy who's done nothing but disappoint his NFL team and his fantasy managers. Why would I not want the running back who, his head coach is wearing his shirt in press conferences, and, he was counting on him in the playoffs last year, all that kind of stuff. Why would I not? He's the cheapest guy. Why would I not want that? I don't think that that's not broken. You still want to hang on to your Gainwell shares. I have people going, should I drop Gainwell for this guy or that guy? I'm like, why are you dropping Gainwell? Just hang on.
You are scooping up Kenneth Gainwell right now. And I love that
Yes.
you mentioned the playoff role he had. The chips are never more in the middle than during the NFL playoffs and the Super Bowl. And look, I know we all knew they were going to move on from Sanders, but at that point, you're just playing the guy you trust, the guy you feel the best about. And that was obviously Kenneth Gainwell. I can't say enough. Now is the time to get Gainwell on the cheap. Now it's going to be hit and miss. It's going to be, the signal's going to go out sometimes. It's going to be, you guys are going to be fine with that. But on most of my fantasy teams, this is not, Dan, the fantasy group we grew up with, where you got 2 or 3 stud running backs and you rolled them out and you trampled over everybody. Now you're lucky if you have one, and a lot of it is mix and match. It's ham and egg. And Kenneth Gainwell fits that strategy really well with a running game we like, with an offensive line we like, with an offensive infrastructure we like. Yeah, one of the things you have to do every week when you do the bids, you put in all those fab offers and everything, is audit who's dropped. Kenneth Gainwell is going to get dropped in some leagues, and I want you, dear listener, you, dear viewer, to scoop up that Kenneth Gainwell.
Yeah, and you talk about contingent upside. Like DeAndre Swift looks like the best back in football, but it's a 2-week sample size. And, he's missed some time in his career. So, Gainwell could have valuable starts for us in, like, the fantasy playoffs.
Yep, definitely. So a couple more questions on running backs. Now, these are guys that I refer to in my own head as the high C running backs because they have less than 10% juice, but there is a lot of octane in the offense. And these are guys like Madison, Pacheco. I'd throw Damian Pierce in there. Cam Akers is now he's now competition for Madison. Do you guys buy any of these guys? Or do you hold out hope for them? Is there anyone here you're going, yeah, I would like to buy them low in a trade?
Pacheco's my preference on that list. I'll start with that.
Okay.
I think Pierce is interesting because I think the Houston offense is pointing up, and he's had some interesting usage weeks, but just very, very poor production. But we saw it last year. None of them get me that excited though of that list, Dan.
I can't blame you. No doubt about it.
It's funny, I wrote, or maybe I talked on the show with Matt Harmon. I talked about earlier. I just made a comment about Madison was productive on Sunday, but I hadn't had a chance to watch all the snaps yet. And then when I rewatched that game, or actually watched it for the first time, and look, I'm rooting for Madison. I mean, he got off to a bad start, and then some of the rotten people out there just made his life miserable on social media, which is just don't do that. The first rule in life is just don't be a jerk.
Yeah.
Right? Don't do something that you wouldn't want somebody to do to your kids or whatever. Don't be like that. So I was happy that he had a productive game, but I mean, he was putting the ball on the ground. He was dropping passes. Not that Cam Akers is anything special, but they have brought in Akers. I think at some point Chandler has to get more involved. And it's just so funny. I mean, last year, Dan knows this well, but the Vikings go 13-4. They're outscored. They win all the coin flip games. It just seems like this year they're paying that the taxes come due, and they're going to lose all the close games. And last week the Chargers and the Vikings had somebody has to lose this game in excruciating fashion. Bowl. The Chargers tried to give it away. The Vikings said we don't want it. I don't know how Minnesota was running the clock at the last minute. Let's get the limited amount of snaps possible here, guys, and make sure we don't win. But I'm just worried that the Vikings aren't really sold on Madison to begin with. Eventually they were going to bring in competition. We thought maybe it might be Hunt. It wasn't. But the thing with Pacheco is I think Kansas City really does believe he's their best back, but they want to use here's the thing with backfields, right? You can reduce a backfield to 2. That's good, especially if the quarterback doesn't run all that much. Mahomes will sprinkle in running. But when a backfield could be 3 deep, that's 3 deep is the committee now. 2 deep is like, oh, we can live with that. Montgomery and Gibbs can coexist when Montgomery's healthy, and that's totally fine. There's plenty of teams that if you get it down to 2, we know what to do with that. We can distribute double touches to each guy every week on a projection, and we can play those guys. Once you get 3 deep, it becomes problematic. So I would love it if Kansas City found a way to reduce down to 2. And look, I'm a McKinnon guy too. He's a little bit like that Mostert case where it's like it's so late in his career. If it was going to happen, it probably would have happened by now. But man, was he talking about a guy who was trusted in the late season in the playoffs? That was Jerick McKinnon last year. I still think Pacheco is the most, and we've all fallen out of love with CEH if we even liked him at all, and what a bad pick that ended up being. But I think Pacheco's the quote unquote upside guy here in Minnesota. In Kansas City. I'm just concerned that it might be 3-headed, and therefore there's a cap ceiling as well.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So let's before we get out of here, let's talk about the Rams a little bit. They were kind of an interesting team. Definitely, if we'd have asked the question after week 2, which offenses have surprised you the most, I think the Rams would be pretty close to number 1 with me as far as most surprising offenses. But they came back to earth a little bit last night, and yet there's still some interesting players, some interesting situations there. Kyren, he's still king of the world with the Rams backfield. There's nobody else getting touches back there at all. Puka came back to earth a little bit last night. Are the good times gone forever for him, or is he somebody that you're still pretty excited about and say, bad games happen every once in a while? What are your thoughts on those two guys, Scott?
First of all, Williams is a much better player than I thought. I knew him a little bit at Notre Dame. I know he had the bad combine run, and maybe he's a slower back. He played 100% of the snaps Monday. 100%. He drew 7 targets. I know only 2 of them were complete, but anybody who's going to be on the field that much and is tied to a Sean McVay offense, and I actually think Stafford's played reasonably well. I know that there are some metrics out there that he's kind of lagging in accurate pass percentage, so maybe Nakua's ability to adjust to the ball is making him look good, making contested catches. And man, I was not early to Nakua, and that's no fun. I do think Nakua is here to stay, even when Kupp comes back. The bottom line is, here's the thing with the Rams to me. They're kind of a poor man's version of Arizona. I thought this team had look out below potential. I was avoiding Kupp like the plague. That may wind up being right for the wrong reasons, because I didn't say he'd miss all. I thought he had injury risk. I didn't think he was already hurt to the point that we didn't know when he would come back. But I did avoid Kupp. I thought Akers might be quasi-playable. I thought Tyler Higbee might be doing what Zach Ertz is doing. Higbee's not doing that. But I didn't shove in on Nakua or draft him. That was a mistake. Stafford has more left than I thought. That was a mistake. Williams is a better player than I expected. That was a mistake. I think Williams, because running back is so ugly right now, I think he has to be a top 20 running back. I'm maybe 15, 17, 19, something like that. Because it just gets gross so quickly. It becomes the Shawshank 500-yard crawl so quickly at running back, and they don't have anybody else. And I know sometimes that can give you, just because somebody's the only show in town. I kind of thought that was the case for Akers a month ago. It obviously wasn't. But when I see somebody playing 100% of snaps on Monday Night Football, yeah, he's the only show in town.
I completely agree with you on Kyren Williams. That's an RB2. That's what we want, him getting all those targets. And Puka, it was a huge positive. Like, you see all these people, I think, disappointed because they watch him for the first time on Monday Night Football. But a bad game for him was 12.5 points in PPR. Like, you start going down the list, guys, of wide receiver twos, that's something you'll absolutely take. It wasn't the historical start that he had in the first 2 games, but enough to get you by most weeks if you had your roster properly constructed and you weren't like buying high on Puka after like week 1 in some huge trade, then you're still in good shape with that. But you know what's funny, guys, is you don't hear any reports on Cooper Kupp. There's none. There's no like, hey, Cooper Kupp looks good. Cooper Kupp is jogging. Like, I'm very pessimistic about this. I feel like usually teams leak something that a guy's looking good, getting back to health, some kind of positive buzz, and we don't hear anything about Cooper Kupp, like zero.
This could be the right time to trade for Puka, actually, because a little bit of the steam came off, and he's been comically – he should have 2 or 3 touchdowns. And he's had a couple of plays that just missed. He got tackled close to the goal line, or there's one connection. I think he had a foot out of bounds. Obviously, he has all those targets. And I so agree with what you said about Kupp. It's when/if he comes back. This is not a guarantee that Cooper Kupp. And I say this sadly. I thought he should have been the NFL's MVP. They will never give it to a wide receiver. If they wouldn't give it to Jerry Rice or Randy Moss, they're not going to give it to Cooper Kupp. But I thought he was the best player in football 2 years ago, and it's no fun when he's not playing. But Puka, not that the Puka manager is going to, oh, yeah, sure, I'll trade him for whatever you got. Give me Alexander Madison, call it a day. That's never going to happen. But at least you can tell yourself a story. He had a quiet game. It was an island game. He hasn't scored a touchdown yet. He's not the hottest story in the league now. Now Miami's the hottest story in the league. Maybe the trade price might be a little bit more reasonable, and I would be buying.
Yeah, totally makes sense. I did have a lot of Kyren. Do have a lot of Kyren. I kind of came to it this sort of the same way I came to Gainwell, where it was just I looked at Akers and how many times, how many ways is he disappointed, and his relationship with McVay felt very fraught. So it just kind of felt like and then we start hearing the good news nuggets in training camp about Kyren Williams and looking good, and he's going to have a role and all that kind of stuff. So I just started kind of stockpiling him there. I wish I'd done that with Puka. I just didn't, because this is one of those process plays where I sit there and I say, well, 4th, 5th round wide receivers, how many of these guys do we hear about in training camps and the glowing reports and, oh, they're going to be great, they're going to be fantastic. And the season rolls around, and that's the last you ever hear of them was that 3rd preseason game. And so I thought, this is kind of what's going on with Puka. But, definitely I think my flaw was not, if I'm listening to that on Kyren, I should probably listen to it on Puka a little bit. And also, with Kupp being out, there was that opportunity there, which I didn't properly weight. But, I think you're right. I think Puka is maybe a little bit of a buy right now, coming off this bad game. Go out there, put out some offers, see if somebody's scared that this is the new reality. And, maybe you can get something off of that.
Would you rather have Puka or T. Higgins right now?
I mean,
I think it might be Puka. T. Higgins is, it depends if T. Higgins is my wide receiver 3 somehow, and I can, accept the boom bust nature of him. But you've got also the fact that Joe Burrow looks very hobbled, and the offense is running completely through Jamar Chase. So, I think T. Higgins is a really, really talented player. I think if it was a neutral situation and it was like, which player could I have on the Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, it's T. Higgins a million times out of a million. But for fantasy football, I know Puka Nacua is going to give me a better weekly floor than T. Higgins is right now. We've seen it in 2 out of 3 weeks.
You said that so well. T. Higgins is like having pocket kings, and then the board run out is 4 hearts and an ace, and you just know you lost. Somebody's got an ace or somebody's got a heart, and your kings are worthless. I don't want to say T. Higgins is worthless, but he's had the worst possible run out with the Burrow injury. And by my math, Jamar Chase had a 100% target share on Monday night. Every pass was to him. I was playing against him in a couple of leagues where all I needed him to do was basically not do the Keenan Allen game. And I thought he was going to get there, even though Burrow didn't look good. And that, man, football sucks when Joe Burrow's hurt, but Burrow doesn't look good. And, T. Higgins, man, look, after week 1, the bagel, we all knew that wasn't real. So, the cheapest advice going was to go get T. Higgins. I don't know how gettable that was. The real money play was T. Higgins to, quote unquote, get back to business and then trade him after week 2. That's what I probably should have done.
Yeah, T was kind of an interesting situation. Theo can tell you, I was down on T at his draft capital. what it was costing to get him, because I was like, this guy is a second wide receiver, and it's Chase, and it's not close when it comes to Burrow's favorite target. T can certainly have some weeks, but he was being drafted at a point where even with Chase out 5 weeks last year, T still could not have paid that draft price off with what you were having to pay for him this year. So it just, to me, it wasn't worth it. If he'd been going a round or two later, I'd have been all over him. I'd probably, have buckets and buckets of T. But, fortunately, he was going just heavy enough that I didn't get that much. But I think you're exactly right. I mean, the Puka Nakua story, especially with, the possibility the Cup might not come back, that looks so much more compelling than any case you can paint for T right now. And I think that's probably a trade you could get done all day.
And Dan, you have all of the high draft capital wide receiver twos on their own team. You trade any single one of them for Keenan Allen right now, including Devonta Smith. But T. Higgins especially, I think a lot of managers took T. Higgins. And Waddle, obviously, missed the game this past week with health. He could have been a big part of the 70-point onslaught, in a different universe. But it's the T. Higgins over Keenan Allen is just like the tilting one for so many managers staring at their old draft boards.
I'm sure I have some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was fortunate. Like I say, I was heavily in on Keenan Allen, probably to the detriment of myself on a couple other players that I would like to have, like TJ Hawkinson, who I know in real life is less exciting than he is in fantasy. But in a tight end
PPR god, premium god, PPR god. I don't know how many catches TJ Hawkinson would need to go over 100 yards, but it doesn't matter because he already has 7 for 65 in his back pocket.
Right, exactly, and that's that's the whole thing there. And if you're playing in a lot of tight end premium, those are the guys you want to highlight. You want to grab those guys rather, not so much the George Kittles who are gonna, have 3 for 95 and a touchdown. You want to get the Hawkinson 7 for 65.
He is a drumbeat, man. He is so consistent, and at a position where it's just been so awful with. Kelsey misses a game, and Andrews can't get anything going, and Dallas Goedert, who I still think is a wonderful player, but it's just never going to be featured on that offense. It's just he gets lost in the shuffle there, and then Dallas Goedert is like George Harrison on the Beatles, right? Where George Harrison gets 2 songs, they're great. It's like, oh, John, oh, Paul, write us another song, tell us another story, and we'll see George, next album. Here Comes the Sun might be my favorite Beatles song, but George Harrison needed to go solo to say everything he had to say because he was buried behind A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith and Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, exactly. So let's go out on this. We're talking about tight ends, and we barely covered him at all. Darren Waller, is he a buy right now, or a hold, or a sell for you guys?
He's a hold. I think we saw him have production against Arizona, did nothing against Dallas, but the entire team did nothing against Dallas. And this past game, it was very disappointing, but it was San Francisco. It was a buzzsaw. I think that the Seattle game is tilting. At the end of the day, Darren Waller has to be utilized if they're going to turn this thing around. The wide receivers are inconsistent. He's definitely not going to return the kind of draft capital you put into him. I just don't think the offense is going to support that. But I think he could beat what he was last year, which was tight end 10 overall in tight end points per game. I think he could be higher than that. I think he'll bounce back. But you'd probably trade him for Sam Laporta.
I mostly co-sign what Theo said. Again, we talk about the bad runouts, right? Look at the Steelers' offense. Here's your schedule. San Francisco, good luck. Cleveland, who somehow Cleveland got a memo from the NFL that they could play 15 guys on every snap. It's unbelievable how – and look, I get it. Tennessee could make a lot of defenses look good, but that defense looks too good to be true right now. That's what the Giants have faced. They faced Dallas at the worst time, and Dallas ate their lunch. And then they faced the 49ers at the worst time, and the Niners ate their lunch. I still believe in Dable. I still believe in Daniel Jones for what we believe he is, a useful fantasy player and, kind of a hit-and-miss real-life guy. And as much as I'm always kind of a Darius Slayton sympathizer, and who knows, maybe Hyatt will be a player someday, but that receiver room is a factory of sadness. They need Darren Waller. If he stays healthy, he's going to by accident be like tight end 6 or 7. He's got the upside to maybe get into that group right behind Kelsey. So I co-sign with Theo. I would go get Darren Waller. I mean, not at all costs, but if it's arrow up, arrow down, arrow neutral, I would say the arrow's still pointing up for Waller.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. I think his 2 worst games are probably behind him. So as long as he can stay healthy, I think everything we were looking for. The thesis is still valid. So let's see what happens. Though I will say the Giants' offense is relatively disappointing, even considering who they've played. You still have to be mildly disappointed by what's going on in Giants land.
Big time.
Yep. And Theo, of course, knows all about that, having in the New York area. So
yeah, absolutely. Giants fans are not very happy, and neither are Jets fans. It's a sad time.
Let me pivot off that. I know I talked about him in brief at the beginning. Garrett Wilson's one of my roast roster players. Just make me feel better about that.
I think he's an elite talent, and I refuse to believe that it's going to be Zach Wilson for the entire year. I think that literally anyone would be better than Zach Wilson, and it's incredibly frustrating. We talked about Josh Dobbs. Andy Dalton goes out and has a tremendous game. You would trade Zach Wilson for legitimately 55 NFL quarterbacks. No question in my mind. I think it's either Robert Saleh gets fired and the next head coach puts in a different quarterback, or they make a quarterback change. But I don't understand why Saleh is being so loyal to Wilson. I would make the switch to pretty much anybody. You can't run an NFL offense. So I don't know if that makes you feel worse, but I don't feel great about my Garrett Wilson shares either. It's very, very frustrating because he's such a great player. It's like Odell Beckham, year 2 Odell, if Odell had the worst quarterback on earth.
And, we suffered through Nathaniel Hackett over his skis as the Denver coach. We were okay with him going to the Jets because, it's him and Rodgers. They're simpatico. But once Rodgers is out of the picture, maybe Hackett's part of the problem too. I think of almost every backup, even obviously Washington's not going to trade Brissett, or the Colts aren't going to trade Minshew, but those guys would look like Joe Namath right now on the Jets. Sam Darnold, if they still had Darnold, I could squint and see some upside there. Obviously these are not going to happen. These deals aren't going to happen. I still wonder if a team like Minnesota, and I know the cap's complicated in the NFL, but a team like Minnesota tanks, or the Titans have their next quarterback who isn't Tannehill on the roster. I mean, they couldn't go for Ryan Tannehill. They couldn't figure out the way to make that work. But here's the bottom line, Theo. You said it. Anything is better, right? What's the Coughlin's law? Anything different is always something better, or something like that. Whatever you do, Jets, just do something different, because Zach Wilson is the worst possible answer. I know Trevor Simeon's not any kind of a solution, but whatever. I'd take Joe Flacco. I'd take Mike White back. I'd take anything. And by the way, if you're in a Superflex league, I hate to say this, but Mike White's better be on a roster, because if Tua gets hurt, I know Mike White's not Tua, but Mike McDaniel, I think, could make anybody look great in this offense. So to make sure Mike White's not percolating out there, because the week that Tua does get hurt, if it happens, I'm not wishing it into existence. We're all going to wish we had their quarterback. Remember, Dan, you said to me, I was playing Scrabble one weekend. You said, Kurt Warner got hurt. I guess Trent Green has the keys to the Ferrari now. Maybe Green didn't go to the moon quite like we thought. And actually, that Rams 2000 team was the best offense I'd ever seen. They didn't go to the Super Bowl that year until Warner got hurt. I remember one week their kicker got hurt, and they started going for 2 after every touchdown. I'm like, they should just do this all the time. Nobody can stop these guys. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. Jets, I don't care. Joe Namath, Glenn Foley, Vinny Testaverde, Ray Lucas, I don't care. Get somebody, anybody. He can't be named Zach Wilson. I've had it.
Well, they have that commercial about the the old NFL players unretiring, and I'm like, man, any of those quarterbacks, I would take them.
Any.
Sure.
RG3 out of the.
I would
out of
seriously
the
take Matt Ryan.
Yeah.
I would take Matt Ryan. And
the Matt Ryan and Carson Wentz just sitting out there would be a massive upgrade. I mean, it's not even close to me. So I don't understand it. It's incredibly frustrating. What are you going to do?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you one thing. And I'm gonna call to mind one of Scott's maxims here. When you're putting Garrett Wilson in your lineup, does that not feel like playing for the friendliest loss, or what? I mean, it's so tough.
I'm hoping for one miracle a week, right? I mean, he got it the first week where Wilson threw an interception. Zach Wilson, plus they have the same last name, which is just annoying. As if Pickens and Pickett wasn't annoying enough. We have two Wilsons. And I
the good Wilson and the awful Wilson.
Yeah. So, Wilson couldn't catch the pass from Zach Wilson. Plus, can we just come to, as Joe Sheehan always says, can we just agree on one spelling on Zach? Does it have to be different for every guy, it seems like? But, you're hoping for one miracle a week. He got it the first game against Buffalo. He turned an interception into a touchdown pass. He housed a slant touchdown against the Cowboys in a day where nothing else went wrong. And then also, this offense is also shipwrecking Breece Hall. I know they don't want to overextend Hall right now, but doesn't this kind of have the Zeke and Tony Pollard feel to it, where Cook is the guy who's cooked, Breece Hall is the guy who's explosive and is just just a young puppy who wants to get out of the cage and play. And the Jets are like, no, you'll stay in the cage for a while.
Yeah, it started to look better this past week, so hopefully that continues. Yeah. No doubt about it. All right, Scott, we should probably get you out of here. We appreciate you sticking with us, as long as you did. This has been fantastic. Always a highlight of my time anytime when I can get you on a podcast. So really, really enjoyed this. Why don't you let people know, again, where they can find you, what you got going on. Make sure you tell them about the podcast you do with Matt Harmon, too. I think that's one of the most listenable, with actionable podcasts that you can listen to.
Thank you so much for that. And thanks you so much for having me, guys. Yeah, I do. Matt Harmon is the leader of our podcast ship, the Yahoo Fantasy Football Podcast, and doing an awesome job with it. I am the Sunday night guest. I will also be on periodically other days during the week, but we start taping Sunday night and just debrief everything that happened and try to get a sense of where the puck is headed and what we're doing with Fab and who we're panicking about and all that stuff. And then it goes well over an hour. And again, you guys know Matt, he's about as good of a receiver analyst as we have, and just a really cool guy. We have fun too, because this game is supposed to be fun. You catch my written work at Yahoo Sports. Every Tuesday I'm doing a thing called On Target, which is all about receiver data. It could be targets, it could be routes run, it could be end zone looks. Tyler Lockett's got 7 end zone targets already. I'd like to get my hands on some more Lockett if I could. There's an old receiver I wasn't afraid to draft. But you can catch me on Twitter, Scott_Pianowski. And I do cover other stuff. I cover baseball. I cover a little bit of hockey. And if you want to talk movies, you want to show me a picture of your dog, you want to brag about your kid just scored 17 points or won the science fair, I'm a human being too. But love talking football. And Dan, Theo, thank you so much for having me on your show. You guys are smart. You guys are fun. You guys are grounded. We own the stuff we get wrong. We want to get better. And the mistake I'm going to clean up this year is we're going to make sure I have a long conversation with both of you next year so I can draft better for 2024.
No, this was a blast. And everybody, please check out press coverage. I have Jax Falcone, Scott Bullinger on tomorrow at 1 p.m. And then Billy Muzio and I on First Class Fantasy on Thursday, 3:30. We have Davis Maddock coming on. And Dan, are you and JD doing an Owner's Lounge this week?
I believe we're gonna do a tailgate show for sure. Try to get in an Owner's Lounge as well. The Owner's Lounge is a little bit up in the air, but for sure the tailgate. And we've definitely got some Dynasty stuff we need to get covered. So we're gonna try. And
make sure you subscribe to the Goat District podcast as well. Dan and JD are putting out a bunch of extra shows. I put an extra waiver wire show. We're doing a lot of extra things over on the Goat District YouTube page. And also the Goat District. Make sure you subscribe to it anywhere you can get your podcasts. This was awesome tonight. Dan, take us out of here.
All right, yeah. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Again, make sure you hit that like. Make sure you hit that subscribe. Make sure you go over to the Goat District. Do the same thing there. We appreciate you all, and we will catch you all later.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In package to continue to make all this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.